Okay, mister, you ready to pick a peach? You gonna use 2 hands? Okay. Okay, there you go. There you go. Wow, good job. Good. Oh. Well, it does look like a ball, huh? Oh, should we try? Oh. This year we finally welcomed our son, and absolutely everything about literally everything that I'm doing has totally changed. You would have never seen me growing this many of anything in years past, because while I do know how to grow food, I don't actually know how to grow food on scale like a lot of my friends do, which is actually why we started doing the farm tours that we started doing this last year. And something really, really sweet has happened as a result. I've deepened friendships I truly care about, and I've also picked up a whole lot of tips that I hope to share with you, not just on the food growing side, but also on what we do with that food once we get up to the house. What the heck do you actually do with all this stuff, and how do you keep up with it in peak gardening season and not let it all just go to spoil or get wasted? I don't know about you, but I very rarely have an entire day to spend in the kitchen, and that's why the thought of canning or doing a whole ton of prep work all at once is pretty daunting to me and honestly stressful. But hopefully these tips will help you at least limp your produce along until you get a little bigger chunk of time to be able to do things. It would be great if all of our produce got ripe all at the exact same time, but that's just not how nature works. So when I have a whole bunch of tasks I need to do, like blanching and freezing, I try to save up as many of the vegetables that need to have that process done to them so that I can do it all at once, because doing things in batches is just simply more time efficient. If you're gonna get all the stuff out, you might as well do it all at once. So while we were waiting for all of the rest of the cabbages and the brassicas to get ready to pick, these things have literally just been chilling in the fridge.
Well, Brassica Park moved inside. Bum, 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 bum.
Brassicas in particular, cabbages, broccolis, Napa cabbages less so, but still surprisingly long. You can leave these things in the fridge and they can maintain most of their integrity for quite a while. I mean, sometimes up to a couple months, which is pretty cool, but also we don't all have that much space in our fridge. For things like asparagus and herbs that get droopy like the moment that you pick them, go ahead and put them in some water, and you can leave them out on the counter for a day or two like that, or you can just toss them right in your fridge and they'll last for about a week like that without having to do any prep or anything else. If you only have a few of something, or you're just really, really slowly picking a few each day, a great way to preserve it and also extend the shelf life is to create some refrigerator pickles, which don't have to actually be cucumbers. It can be asparagus, it can be garlic scapes, it can be a combination of all the things, and it's basically vinegar, water, salt, and whatever herbs and spices you want to put in it to make it taste good. And then these can last for quite a while, and you can keep adding to it and subtracting from it whenever you're hungry. Guess what? After 6 years, I finally grew an artichoke in Tennessee. Emphasis on one artichoke. I feel like it's right here.
I can't even see that.
That is so rude, Adam. It's right here. Yes, it is the size of my thumbnail. It's really pathetically small. It will get a little bit bigger. Not much. And obviously this is not going to feed a family of 12. But this feels like such a big win, because I have tried to grow artichokes every single year since we moved here, and I was very successful in growing a lot of artichokes in Washington. The artichokes are as tall as I am, so I'm going to harvest some for dinner tonight, and they'll be delightful. And it just didn't seem to me like it should be as hard as it's been to grow them. Also, after weeks and weeks of absolute rain deluges, the garden's gotten a little out of control because I literally couldn't even come out here and work. The pathways have disappeared, and we've got some work to do to reclaim this space a bit. I am very excited about this potato patch over here, not only because I'm excited to see how many potatoes we're going to get out of it. It's almost time to harvest them. But once we do harvest them, then we've got this nice giant swath of land that we can plant the next thing in. So this is going to become our corn patch after this. But couple things. It's probably a little hard to tell from back there, but if I step back into the patch, you'll notice that it's much taller back here, and that's because we've been hilling the potatoes, adding mulch every couple weeks, every time we've got about 8 inches of plant above the soil, up until they start to flower. And so when they start to flower, that's when we stop hilling. So we're just gonna wait for these leaves to start yellowing and dying off, and we'll know these potatoes are ready to pick. And then we'll cure them and store them. Because it's still sweet potato planting time in most of the US, I wanted to share this quick, easy tip about making your own sweet potatoes from last year's sweet potatoes without having to do all of the annoying slip making, toothpicks in the water, and complicated stuff that I see people online doing all the time. You might notice that some of these sweet potatoes have little sprouts on them, and those aren't gonna be eaten. We're probably gonna cut those little ends off anyway. These little ends, put down in some soil and kept moist for a week or two, then become very plantable, free sweet potato slips that you can plant for next year's sweet potatoes. I leave a little seed tray like this out here all the time with some soil in it, and I try to keep this moist, but usually the rain does that for me. And then I've got a spot. I can just take my little cuttings, drop them in here, and we do this with all kinds of things, like sweet potatoes is one thing. Here you can see a ginger out here that should be growing some roots and some stuff already. You can see these sweet potatoes have been in here a little bit longer, and this is just a great way to get free plants, free starts out of the kitchen as you're doing food prep. I have a little bowl in my kitchen all the time that collects my kitchen scraps, but I bring it outside and put it into a bucket that has a sealable lid on it, and I just keep adding to it. And if this is too gross for you, because yeah, it will get really, really stinky and stuff, then you can also have a second bucket with a lid that has sawdust on it, and you can put little layers of sawdust in between things. But by the time I've collected 2 or 3 buckets like this, I'm now ready to make another compost pile, and that's how I do it. Anything that might actually have a second use, like the butts of things that still have flavor in them, I keep a little used bag of random scraps in the freezer, and then I add these things to it, and then there you go. When you've got some extra meat bones, you don't have to cut real ingredients for stock. You've got a whole bunch of stock ingredients right here, and you just dump them in the Instapot with some water and the bones, put some salt in it. Bonus tip, always put your Parmesan cheese rinds in there, and you can use the rind to make your stock way more delicious tasting. And then there you go, you've got yourself a stew.
You take this home, throw it in a pot, add some broth, a potato. Baby, you got a stew going.
I think I'd like my money back.
And this is for all the naysayers that have been telling me I couldn't grow fruit in the South, specifically in this area, without sprays, because boy howdy, are those some of the best peaches I've ever had. I mean, they don't look perfect, and there might be a bug in 1 or 2 of them. But this isn't an ASMR channel, so we're just gonna move right along. Veteran food producers already know this to be the case, but if you're new doing all of this and this is your first year with your first garden, preserving your first harvest, this is a fair warning. When you're first planting all this stuff, it seems so enormous. You've spent so much time and effort and dedicated so much space to growing these things that once they're actually all processed, it's like, oh, this? And this year we're doing our food a lot more intentionally and a lot differently, but in that we had made a lot of jokes. I think we have a whole video about it, about how ridiculous our brassica situation was, Brassica Park. And by the time it was actually grown up and ready to harvest, it was so much stuff. And here's a couple funny examples. This is 4 broccoli plants worth of broccoli stems. And then far more egregious is I grew all of my Napa cabbage for my favorite thing every year, our family kimchi. And first of all, 10 Napa cabbages plus the other things we put in the kimchi fit into this. That in and of itself seemed like kind of a crazy feat and a little depressing. But what's even more insane is that 3 days into that ferment, all those cabbages then turned into but 3 wee quart jars of kimchi. But if you're not into kimchi and you're not doing ferments like this, I will make this a little bit more relatable and say that if you're putting vegetables away in the freezer, let's just run down to the freezers and laugh about how little Nebraska Park looks once it's all actually done. Good night. All right, so here's this craziness. Everything that was the enormity of Nebraska Park, aside from my kimchi, is now right here. And that's lots and lots of meals worth of stuff that will eventually get used, but it is just crazy to see how little everything gets. I know you'll see tons of YouTubers that have beautiful shelves and shelves and shelves of canned items, and I'm gonna level with you. I do a very small amount of canning, but basically 98% of our garden harvest comes inside and gets stored on shelves in bushel baskets like these, in 1 or 2 fermentation crocks, and the vast majority all go straight into the freezer. And even with the things that I do can, strawberries are probably the best example of something that comes in slowly, incrementally over time, and I bring them straight from the garden, pop them in a bag, put them in the freezer, and deal with them later, because I'm most certainly not going to be doing any long, sweaty canning days in the middle of peak harvest season. And in that, I can collect these a little bit at a time, every day as I'm picking, pop them in the freezer, and then usually sometime in the fall after I'm done with everything else, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a Saturday and I'm going to make and can all of my strawberry jam for the year and make and can all of my tomato sauce and other products for the year. But beyond that, everything else is going in these 4 freezers. The one caveat in relying so heavily on freezers to preserve so much of our harvest, though, is that we have to actually be able to count on the freezers to keep working. Because if this fails, we're really, really in trouble. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Jackery. And yeah, we live in Tornado Alley, so we experience power outages, but this past winter we had an apocalyptic level ice storm that shut down the entire city of Nashville for basically 3 weeks. And if we hadn't have had a battery backup system like this, we would have been in big trouble. We had so many use cases that made dealing with that whole situation actually possible because of our home battery backup. I was able to still run my breast pump to be able to feed our son during the ice storm. That was huge. In fact, we actually ended up having to host a bunch of our neighbors at our house during that extended power outage because nothing and nobody around here was actually prepared for that kind of extended power outage. But whether you've been running a gas generator or even another home battery backup system in the past, there is one thing that sets this unit, the HomePower 3600 Pro Max, apart from anything else we've ever had or used. And that is that it has a built-in automatic transfer switch. And that means that if the power goes out, this thing automatically kicks on within a few milliseconds. One of the coolest things about this upgrade for us, because we already had a manual transfer switch installed, which let's just laugh about this. Because I wasn't home when we had the electrician come to install the manual transfer switch. Adam was, and that seemed like a reasonable height to actually mount that thing. But basically, one visit from an electrician for $850 one time got us to the place that we now have not only just a manual transfer switch, but an automatic one. It delivers full automatic transfer switch capabilities at a manual transfer switch price point. It literally cuts your installation costs by up to $3,000 and slashes your installation time by at least a half. But you all know me, I'm never going to just take a brand's word for anything, so stay tuned. Later on in this video, I'm going to have Adam actually turn off our main power breaker and put this thing through an actual stress test as it powers our house as if the grid was totally down. I'm not just gonna show you my garden when it's photograph ready or Instagram ready. I'm a big fan of still inviting people over to your house even when it's messy, and this is a perfect example of that. But here's a pretty important basil tip that I think more people need to know about. First of all, when most of us plant our basil, it starts out as basically one little kind of pathetic stick like this. A lot of people are super eager really early in the season, and they'll pick off the leaves one by one, thinking that that's actually the way that we harvest basil. And it pretty quickly starts shooting up flowers and going to seed. But you can turn a little sprig of basil like this into a huge bushy plant with just a little patience and effort over time. Because if we look at the side of this basil here, everywhere that there's new leaves coming out, there's basically two little sprigs. What you want to do is basically keep pruning this back. Every time there is one of those little two side shoot things on your plant, we're telling the plant, oh, you need to put more energy into creating more solar panels to collect the sun's energy, and it's not yet time to go to seed. But here's the thing, I don't have the time, energy, or effort to really carefully prune each little piece of my basil plant for absolute maximum production, especially when I have some of these. Giving everything a little chomp like that really quickly as I'm walking through the rows is going to exponentially increase my ultimate basil harvest. And yeah, I can go around and pick up all these little leaves and salvage them, and they're still good for dinner tonight. Things like basil are not always coming straight off the plant with long enough stems that you can actually put them in water, but if you take it off the plant in the middle of a Tennessee hot afternoon, it's already droopy and gross before you even get it back to the house. But if you pack them into a mason jar like this with a damp paper towel down in the bottom, you put on a lid and use a handy dandy little vacuum sealer attachment like this, it'll pump all of the air out of that jar, and your herbs will stay nice and fresh in there for a couple weeks. Pretty dang cool that you can solve that problem just like that. And raspberries, I swear, getting raspberries to last any longer than a day or two in the fridge, even the ones that you buy, is impossible. Until now. Put your little berries in your jar. You don't need the moist paper towel for the berries. Same principle. You just put the sealer on, turn it on, it pulls the air out of the jar, toss them in the fridge. They can last like that. Someone said that their raspberries lasted for 2 weeks like this. I'm a little skeptical, but I mean, raspberries have never lasted in my fridge for 2 weeks because everyone eats them. But the thought that they might be able to, absolutely wild, crazy, cool. So there you go, just like that. This is a very small bed, and we're about to have a whole bunch of carrots. You'd be shocked at how many carrots you can actually grow successionally planting them in a fairly small bed throughout the season. And in all honesty, I don't plant a ton of spring carrots ever because carrots that are exposed to cooler weather taste a whole lot better, and because we're in 7B here, we have a much longer growing season, so we can actually successionally plant our carrots. But we use carrots all the time on the farm, and we need them for snacking, we need them for broths, and so we'll plant a small bed of carrots in the early spring and then a whole lot more as we creep into fall and winter. For things like our spring carrots, which I mentioned, we don't grow a ton of them, so they're not going to be stored for a really long time. We put them in a plastic bag, the moist paper towel, put them in the fridge, let them do their thing. And if you want to learn more about long-term carrot storage, check out our video that we did with Michelle from More Than Farmers, because her long-term carrot storage hacks are insanely cool and also cost $0. So these will just go down into a drawer down here, and I'll use them over the next couple weeks. Actually, funnily enough, if you're a family that likes to eat carrot sticks, you can actually prep a whole bunch of carrot sticks, and then you can do this whole vacuum sealer trick with your carrot sticks as well, which will keep them fresh even if they're cut for weeks, which is pretty cool. And by the way, we gotta save the carrot greens for Eugene, because while bunnies should not ever eat actual carrots, they love the carrot greens. But This is way too much for a 2-pound bunny to eat, so let's also give some to Howdy and Bella because they probably deserve a little treat too. Who doesn't deserve a little summer treat? Goodies? Very messy eaters. Howdy, Bella. Hey, buddies. That's some really delightful ASMR, if I do say so myself. I think they like it. That's quite a big mouthful, sir. Are you sharing with your sister? Mother Goose, would you like some carrot tops? Knowing how you already feel about Adam, who's also a carrot top, I wouldn't be surprised that you didn't like them. Well, because I spent so much of my young life living in Asia, one of my very favorite vegetables is kohlrabi. Basically, this whole bulb tastes like a broccoli stalk. And because I don't like the furry, fluffy, textury part of broccoli, this Bad Larry is a real winner. And if you're really desperate, you can actually cut each of these stalks and cook them basically like broccoli stems too. But we have a real brassica problem this year in that we have way too many because all of our brassica starts actually turned into plants for the first time ever, and it's a lot. But anyway, we're gonna leave all the leaves behind in the spot that we took it from so we never leave the soil uncovered. And then when we're ready to plant the next thing, we just scooch those Bad Larrys out of the way and we're ready to plant. But this is a kohlrabi, and it can also look like, come with me here, this little cutie here. And strangely, if you cut them up and put them in a pan and cook them, they'll all really end up the same color and taste the same, and they're all very delicious, and I feel like there's maybe a humanity lesson in there too, but that's kohlrabi, my friends, and it's really good. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how much preservation, how much meal prep, or anything else we do if the grid actually fails and we lose everything that's in the freezer. And in that, I've created a little test. So we're gonna have Adam, who's out by the main breaker switch to the house, turn off the power as if the grid loses power. And in that, we can show you how this home battery actually works. So Adam, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, flip the switch.
All right. I flipped it.
As you can see, there was literally no break. Our oven clock stayed on. The lights stayed on. The fridge is still on and nice and cold. We set up everything in the kitchen to remain operational in the case of a power outage. Can't not have coffee when you're in a stressful power outage. And obviously, the more that you use any of your appliances, the amount of time that you have a battery backup will lessen. But the good news is that this unit is no different than any other Jackery unit. It has solar panels that will recharge it and give it more power. And even if solar recharging isn't an option where you're at, or you just need extra peace of mind, they also have expansion packs that you can buy to extend the battery life of the whole unit. And that is pretty dang cool. So let's say you did actually drain this thing all the way down. One of the coolest things about this is that using the AC power, you can go from a 0% charge to fully recharged in less than 2 hours. It can withstand 6,000 charge cycles, which if we were to actually put that into years, that's 16 years worth of recharges. And Jackery backs it up with a 5-year warranty. But this isn't just a tool for emergency blackouts. Using their smart app control, you can configure the unit to run on time of use or TOU mode. Doing smart scheduling using their app can save a staggering $4,200 in electricity costs per year. When Mother Nature, or Nashville Electric Service, throws a major curveball in your power usage needs, this is exactly the kind of backup you need. It's whisper quiet, it's always ready to go, there's zero long-term maintenance, and it actually does what you need it to do when you need it to do it. I want to give a huge shout out to Jackery for being an ongoing sponsor of this channel and making the making of these videos so you can watch them for free at home possible. This truly is a company and a product that we're using, that we believe in, and that we genuinely think is an important thing to share with you, because this is the kind of backup you want and need to have. And to that end, there is a link down below that you can click to get more information or to get your very own home battery backup system. Now, back to the garden. Something that is truly crappy, especially now that I actually know what you can do about it, and it still happened, is that the brown rot, black rot, got the grapes yet again. This basically happens because your plants are too wet and don't have enough airflow. And here's the thing. Even though I knew what was wrong with the plant, I knew how to avoid it, I kept the plant really well trimmed and I made sure there was plenty of airflow, sometimes Tennessee is going to do its Tennessee thing. And this year, 10 days in a row where we were getting an inch of rain per day, it didn't really matter how much airflow my grapes had. The fungus was among us, and the moisture fed it every day until it took over. But it's far better that I clip all this stuff off now rather than letting it go back down into the soil and continue to spread its fungal garbage and potentially endanger next year's grapes too. But there's still plenty of good grapes on the other plants. And this, my friends, is a huge argument for why you don't want a monoculture system with one plant planted next to the next plant and next to the next plant, because if all of my grapes were planted all in a row right here, they all would have had this issue. So let's go take a look at some healthy grapes, shall we? Over here, we have a lot of grapes that actually be graping, and that is oh so exciting. We've got cluster after cluster of good grapes. And because these ones are so much further along and are not being nearly as affected by that nasty little fungi, we should be pretty good. And the best news is, as I mentioned earlier, as long as we trim all of our grapes up to a, place that they can start again, we still have enough time in our season for these little guys to fully ripen as well. So 2 harvests? I think so. I actually really like zucchini, especially when it's a tender, young little bulb like this. But the problem with zucchini, especially in our hot, humid Tennessee climate, is that one night it looks like this cute little baby, and you're like, okay, I'll just wait till tomorrow. But then you blink and suddenly it's this size, or the size of your thigh. Zucchinis this size and bigger are not nearly as delicious. Yeah, you could cut them up and make stir fries or whatever, but zucchini is the most delicious when it's about like this. When it's still very, very soft to the touch on the outside, and it's not, pumpkin textured on the outside. I mean, everything's edible, in theory. A whole lot of people seem to like chard. Still don't get that. But these, in this stage, are quite yummy. The young tender zucchinis we will put in the fridge and eat them while they're fresh because they taste the best when they're fresh, and also these ones are the tastiest anyways. So those will go back in the fridge. And so real quick, we'll talk about how we use these big boys. While a lot of people would say this is unuseful, it's actually very useful if you think of it as an additive for a meal prep dish that's going to have some other delicious things in it. Because the big zucchinis, we are going to cut them up and we're going to put them in the freezer in just regular gallon bags, no fancy vacuum sealer or anything, along with some cabbage and garlic. Literally so that we've got a pre-portioned, ready-to-go meal. You make some rice, add some sauce and a poached egg, and you've got a 15-minute dinner. And these are the kinds of weeknight meal prep hacks that just make life so much easier. Are we sacrificing potentially a little flavor in the zucchini by not vacuum sealing it? Yes, very likely so. But they're already big boys. They're already not as great. So what's a little more less great? Hey, oh, no. You better not have just eaten one of my ripening limes, you little jerk. No. Hold on, let me just count to make sure they're still here. Ah! Do you know how hard I worked to pollinate those with my paintbrush? You little jerk. Look what you did, you little jerk. I guess this is a good time for me to introduce you to this little lime, and this little lime, and this little lime of mine. 5 years ago, it was but a wee little stick about this big, I mean, I guess it's okay that she got one of them, but I am very, very annoyed because it's been 5 years and I've only gotten 2 limes. And I have to bring this thing in every single winter. And I once tripped and fell while holding the pot. And I caused the pot to break, which now makes watering this thing a real pain in the tushy because it used to be a self-waterer, but now all the water that's supposed to go there comes out this little accidental spout. And I'm too cheap to get a new pot, so it's just more work, I guess. All my previous gardens had to be lazy gardens because I was under the impression back then that I was extremely busy and that it had to be fun. And I mean, let's be honest about who I am. I have the attention span of a fruit fly and the time management skills of a carrot. And so if the garden didn't actually take care of itself, it wasn't going to thrive. We know that it's not super motivating to keep doing something that isn't working well. I didn't want to come out and find all my plants decimated by pests and disease if that was avoidable. And so I was highly motivated to create a garden that took care of itself. By the way, if you're wondering what I'm doing, this is cauliflower. And one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of beginner gardeners make when it comes to growing cauliflower is honestly actually timing related. They try to plant it too late and then, you know, it just goes straight to seed instead of actually making cauliflowers. But the other biggest mistake is that they don't put it to bed. For the best tasting, biggest heads of cauliflower, once it starts making a head, you want to wrap something around the leaves so that then the leaves actually wrap that head of cauliflower and keep it contained, if you will. So that's what I'm doing. You don't have to do that with broccoli though, but you do want to know when your broccoli is actually ready to pick. Every single one of these little bulbs here is a future seed. And if you wait too long to pick your broccoli because you're hoping that it's going to get bigger, you're going to miss your window for actually having the best tasting broccoli too. You want to just harvest the actual head before it starts to spread. And I know that sounds funny, but you want to pick this when all these little clusters are still clustered together and they're not starting to spread out, which usually tends to be about 80 days after you've planted your starts in the ground. Okay, this is how we get broccoli that is actually delicious and not mushy after it's been in the freezer. This is how we have something that's in a nice little vacuum sealed bag that we can take out in the middle of winter, put under the broiler or in the air fryer, and it'll actually crisp up and roast nicely. This is one of my least favorite tasks because it requires so many steps, but it also really, really pays off to do all this with your broccoli and cauliflower specifically. So first of all, we want to cut off the stems. We want to set those aside because stems are my favorite part of broccoli, and I don't actually really like the florets part, which I know that makes me a weirdo, but here we are. And then once we've got all the florets kind of cut to a reasonable, usable, bite-size-ish size, you put them in a rolling boiling water, which means water that is bubbling and boiling, for exactly 3 minutes. And if you haven't already found it, you look for your slotted spoon during that 3 minutes. Your broccoli is going to turn a vibrant green color. Your cauliflower is going to stay white. And then you use your slotted spoon to fish it out, and you put it immediately into an ice bath for another 3 minutes. And while your florets are in there doing their ice bath thing, you put your stalks, which you could do all this together, but I just don't like the florets myself, and so I like the stalks to be separate. And they stay in there for 3 minutes and then get transferred into the ice bath for another 3 minutes. Okay, then I'm gonna fish these little broccolis out of the ice bath and put them to dry out here. And we want to make sure that we get them very, very dry here. So we're gonna pat them dry, we're gonna flip them all around, and any water that's left over here will turn into ice crystals that make it less tasty and potentially turn into freezer burn. So we don't want any of that. We transfer them to a baking sheet, single layer. This is just parchment paper because it makes the transfer easier after they're frozen. So after we've got our blanched, ice bathed, and dried veggies all laid out on a baking sheet like this, we'll take them down to the freezer. We'll put them in the freezer to flash freeze for 2 hours. Then we'll bring them back up, put them in a vacuum sealed bag, label that bag, and then put them to bed in the freezer until midwinter when we need some nice, really crispy roasted broccoli. And then it'll be really delicious and all this work will have seemed worth it. At least we hope. Now here's the thing. I do understand how camera tricks work and forced perspective because I used to be a charter fishing guide and I used to be really good at making the tiny minnows that guys would catch look like giant sharks on camera for their hinge profiles to get more views, but this is no camera trick, my friends. This is a regular head of garlic and this is the new and improved garlic. And you know how we get this? We save the biggest cloves from the biggest heads that were the healthiest the last year, and we put them in healthy soil, and it grows big, beautiful harvests. But all that to say that lazy gardening absolutely does work if you're willing to put in the time and effort up front to work on your soil, to improve things over time, and to just focus on what it's gonna take to grow more and more things like this. You're gonna get there. One of the things that I think is hardest when folks are just getting started gardening for their family is knowing how much of anything to plant. And that for me has mostly been an ongoing series of trial and error. But for me, it was just, I planted too much one year and not enough the next year, and then I was like, okay, well, there's gotta be a happy medium somewhere in there. What I'm doing right now is literally just spreading it out so that it can be in the sun for one day to dry out, which will help me shake some of the dirt off. And then we're gonna take this and put it in the shade so that it can cure, which is just a fancy way of saying dry out, not in the sun, out of the direct sunlight for a little while so it doesn't spoil, because moisture plus heat plus time equals spoilage, and that's what we don't want. A lot of the plants in the brassica family really prefer cooler weather, so it is kind of a huge gamble to try to grow brassicas here in the south where it gets really hot pretty early in the season. So every time I get a solid crop of any good brassica here, especially because I really don't like using row covers or pesticides or anything else, it's a huge win. And I mean, what a beautiful head of cabbage we've got there that will make some really delicious kraut. Now, as I go to pick this, I'm gonna do something that's really important, so pay attention. Check this out. So now as I go to pick this, I'm not gonna rip it out of the ground and ruin all the good soil structure that's attached to a solid root system here. I'm going to clip it right at the base. My lens, this is a real cartman of a cabbage here. Beefcake, use that milking strength. All right. So that's how I pick my cabbage and basically everything else that I'm going to terminate in the garden, because I want that little stem to stay in the soil. I want to give all those cute little microorganisms that live in the soil plenty of new organic material to chew on and to turn into more healthy, happy soil. One of our favorite easy dinner nights in the middle of winter is cabbage wedges that are cooked in the air fryer. First I quarter the cabbage and then I cut it into little 8 wedges like this. But also, do you know about putting avocado oil in a spray bottle and being able to spritz and spray things at literally any angle? This spray bottle is incredible and I love it in every single way. I use it for literally everything, and so there's an extra tip for you. So we're gonna put 4 of the wedges, so we have the perfect amount for our dinner, in a vacuum seal bag. And cabbage is one of the very few things that you can actually put in a vacuum seal bag and not actually have to do any other prep or anything to, which is why I like this little method so much. But we'll show you how the vacuum sealer works as we're doing this, and then you'll know how it works for the other things that'll come later. And now when you're ready to cook them, you pop them out of the freezer, pop them out of this little baggie, toss them in the air fryer, spritz them with a little avocado oil for high heat cooking, add some salt, and then some balsamic vinegar at the end, and they are very, 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 very delicious, especially if you add bacon and or rice.
Probably the single greatest gardening move I made this year as a self-employed parent who is also trying to garden with a toddler is installing this 20,000 lumen or candle watt or whatever it is that just blinded me simply from glancing at it light above my garden so that all of my gardening can happen in the deep night. I know.
No, it's still there.
I know, buddy. Stinger's already in me, so like, it's gonna die, and so am I. Anyways, so all of my gardening can happen in the deep night after Alexander is thoroughly and fully asleep. And let me just say, this is not a small garden. This is a very bright light. I could be 150 feet back there planting beet seedlings. I could be on the other side of our property, weed eating like a crackhead in the middle of the night.
Fancy a midnight nap at Cabbage?
Me too.
And that's probably what the neighbors are going to think is going on over here because, boy howdy. 10 out of 10 would recommend, friends. She be bright.
Bet you thought it was the middle of the day. Nope, this is the light.